Alright, we're back. It's season 39. I hit Master 1 before doing Duelist Cup stuff, but that's neither here nor there. So this month I played basically just Centurion and Striker. I played mostly Striker. It was a blind second list I'll go over in a moment. And I played like 144 games with that list. There were a couple of other lists of Striker I played, but that was the big one, and I don't think the other ones are really worth talking about because I switched off of them and played the one I mostly played because it was doing the best. So we'll talk about the Striker list first. I kind of threw this together on a whim. So let's actually go look at it in Decklists in case I want to talk about any extra cards. So let's go talk about this real quick. This is the wrong deck. Oh my gosh. There we go. Yikes. So this is the list I was running. Basically, just go second, break boards, try to draw into engage, so you're playing 3 thrusts to get into engage. We're playing a talents, not multiple, because you don't want to draw multiple. Multiple droplets is fine, because it either helps break a board, or when you pass turn, because you inevitably didn't kill them because you're playing Striker, it's extra interruption, so maybe you have like 2 Widow Anchor or something, and now they're both live. Pretty straightforward. Multi-roll can send a chicken game. Frankly, multi-roll is a card that kind of forces your opponent to interact with it. Unless you have a hand that's really sad, it usually does its job. And I found even like heavy storming my own multi-roll to be worthwhile in a lot of games. Heavy Storm way freaking overperformed for me. Just having a second copy of essentially Harpy's Feather Duster was great. It not being Lightning Storm, I think, was also relevant because I can like draw into it after activating Chicken Game. I think you can play a different version of this deck. I also think hypothetically you should not be playing 3 Ray just because drawing multiple Ray is like a death sentence. You don't want to draw dead cards, and discarding them at the end of the turn with Into the Void just feels so freaking bad. However, I wasn't drawing Ray. I put in 3, and I didn't overdraw Ray too much, so... 1 Rose. I don't think cutting Rose is necessarily worth it. I think it makes Rhoda way better when you can at least search for an extra body. Duster and Heavy Storm, like I said, just great. A lot of decks are ending on like Desiree and like relevant back row. White Porcelain's on back row. The Snake Eyes deck is frequently ending on Desiree for a lot of people. They like going for the negate line rather than just doing the extra bodies from... I forgot the Fiendsmith card names. The extra bodies from a Lacrima line. Or if they do a Lacrima line, they'll do the Fiendsmith's track so they have more names engraved, or Light Fiends engraved. And still end on a Desiree. And I tend to agree with them, just because it's like a negate, and when it goes to the graveyard, if your opponent's breaking your board, you get to take care of a card on field, which I feel like is very relevant when you're playing against most decks. And obviously these are cards that like force interaction, and then if you have Droplet, or if you have linkage, you can make it so Desiree can't negate it in particular. You need some proactive cards, and these are proactive cards. Bunch of draw 1 cards, search 1 card. You need Ray. This is searches Ray. It also searches Rose. Extra body sometimes. That's nice. If you search Rose and they have Maxi, that's really annoying. It'll happen. Into the Void, once again, draw 1 card. Chicken Game, same thing, draw 1 card. Engage, search and draw. Search and draw. That's it. 2 Afterburners. I like having multiple Afterburners. I think 2 is a sweet spot. I think you can play 3, because I think this version of this deck really lacks cards that do something. Because you basically have You want to force your opponent to interact so that tactics and thrusts are alive. And I actually cut 2 talents, not because it was like drawing them too much mostly, but because it was actually like they would be cards in my opening hand that don't do anything. So if I drew, like, if I couldn't get my opponent to interact with me, I can't activate these cards. And sometimes people will see you're on Striker and just not activate a monster effect. And you need cards that punish your opponent for not interacting with you. So if you have too many thrusts and tactics, I found I'd draw into them, and it'd be really embarrassing for your opponent to do literally nothing and the Striker engine to not do anything. Just because it was a game where you drew weird. So Afterburners forces something. Engage forces something by searching a card that does something. Multi-roll threatens that you're going to do something, but I've had it where if your opponent lets multi-roll resolve and you are basically hoping to get off like a talents or thrust off of it, and you just have like called by, droplet, cards that don't actually clear the board, you just sort of sit there awkwardly and have to pass turn. But I think that's a big thing with this, with Striker in general, that I don't think I've heard that people really talk about, is that there are cards you need to pressure your opponent at all. And obviously Ray is one of those cards. Just to make sure that they start playing for tactics and thrusts version of this deck, which I think tend to be the best just because it allows you to get engaged going. I think there's a world where you consider cutting thrusts and also all the draw 1 cards in this deck list, just because Droll is miserable. This card sucks. I don't like it. You look at this deck list, and obviously I don't like it. So I think there's an argument to say play around it and do like talents where you can take or rip out of your opponent's hand and not worry about it. The most annoying games are ones where you get max seed, you start playing around max C, and then they immediately troll you, and you're like, oh, okay. That's another reason I'm talking about the concept of like cards that need to do something. Because getting trolled while you have 3 cards in hand, that just also get cards from your deck to your hand, just feels really awful. But yeah. 3 multi-roll, like I said, it gets rid of chicken game. It kind of forces interaction. It lets you force your power cards through. Call by the Grave. You might be blinding second, but I have terrible news for you, which is that they're really powerful graveyard effects. And the hand traps, like Maxi, Droll, are really popular, really deadly. Being able to call by an Ash can be really freaking good. There are a lot of Ilya Sylvia. Hitting that with call by is really good. It just hits too much engine and non-engine. I can't really think of a game where I'm like, oh my gosh, I have call by the Grave. That's terrible. Widow Anchor is another card that actually forces something because you can steal your opponent's monster and you can use it to run over their stuff in combat. Just helps actually fight the board. Widow Anchor is very powerful. Shark Cannon is another graveyard interaction. I'm not running multiples of it just because I don't think it tends to help fight the board in the way I want to. And I used to run 2, but I found I only need the 1, and I don't need to run. I'm trying to cut as many cards that don't really do anything against my opponent's board, so I'm more likely to draw good cards. Droplet is just a really great board breaker. You can send a spell you activated. If you have a chicken game, that's also like another free negate. Just a very powerful card for any deck that wants to go second, and also in particular play spells too. And with this one, you're slightly more likely to have 2 monsters in hand and be able to send one of them away for free, in order to make it so your opponent can't respond to monster effects. And then, of course, Linkage. Linkage and Droplet, as mentioned before, also play around Desiree with a card. It's actually why I'm playing a Kaina, by the way, is so that you can summon a monster that Desiree negating won't be an issue to you if you change Linkage to, you know, Afterburners or Widow Anchor or Duster or Heavy Storm or something. Extra deck I think is pretty straightforward. It's Typhon, Kagari 3, Shizuku 2, Hayate 2. I made room for Kaina in this list. I think I cut access code for it because access code doesn't really come up. Kaina can also hypothetically come up against Tenpai, which I don't think is irrelevant. Zeke is you make Zeke sometimes to like interact with a card or make sure your opponent has a monster on your next turn or something like that. But Zeke is a little or just to get a bigger monster. That's a link to. By sending like a dead card in hand or something. Azalea, I think, is really good. I feel like Azalea tends to overperform. I wish it were easier to make with just striker cards. It doesn't require effect monsters, which is nice if you want to be playing Hornet drones instead of like multiple Ray, which I think this is something to consider. But I just prefer, I don't like drones, especially when Max C is in a format, because it's just like extra cards for your opponent for no reason. When you can not do that by not playing it. Sometimes if you draw 2 Ray, you might wish one of those Rays was a Hornet drones, but I feel like in my experience, I would just much prefer to not need to worry about Max C, because I feel like that's one of the things this deck is more likely to be good at than most other decks, and I feel like you should be leaning into strengths of your deck rather than trying to make it more like other decks that are trying to combo off a lot. Like, your ideal thing should be like, okay, you Max Seed, I'm going to summon Kagari, and like, maybe a Shizuku. And both of those cards I'm summoning should make me go, like, +1 at least. As opposed to my opponent who's getting, like, an Upstart Goblin. Maybe you need to make a Typhon. You know. Depends. Camellia doesn't really come up in the blind second version in my experience, but hypothetically you could take your opponent's monsters and make Camellia go back on the engine. I actually found more relevant was Azalea Temperance for that, where I'd like steal an elf and another monster, and then I'd be able to make Azalea Temperance. But Azalea, I think, sorry, Camellia I think is relevant in order to have that option, but I think Camellia is actually surprisingly cuttable. SP is really good for targeted banish and sometimes extra interaction. That passes back to your turn, and then you can like send it away with multi-roll or something else necessary. Engage 0 is here because it's hypothetically a negate for linkage on your opponent's turn, but more realistically what it is a light Sky Striker Ace monster to have linkage's extra attack effect. So you can go like Ray into Engage 0 into Kagari for 25 into Shizuku for 25 or Hayate for 25 or whatever. That also doesn't like require a monster effect. I honestly think Engage 0 is a reason to cut Rose. So for that deck list, like I said, 144 games. I won 83, lost 61. I had a 57% win rate with it. I got off of it because I had a really unlucky streak, and I was kind of done watching my opponents go first after I got unlucky for a little bit. And then I switched to Centurion. I said I want the deck to go first, and I want to play a lot of hand traps, and I have Centurion, and here it is. So for Centurion, I only played this for 38 games. I had a 65% win rate with it, and as you can see, I got a 10 win streak. This was unreasonably lucky. Do not expect to win this much with Centurion. I just think it went really well. For this one, we're just playing a bunch of hand traps. You'll note there are some 2-ofs. That's because I wasn't sure which ones were best. And I also was like, you know what? It kind of avoids, like, hard once per turn stuff. So, you know, like, 3 Veiler, 3 Imperm. Because those don't have once per turns on them. Ghost Mourner, I think, is, like, you know, sort of an extra copy of Imperm and Veiler. Bell, like, counters Called by the Grave. Ogre can hit, like, Deceitful Sinful Spoils or the Millennium cards. All of them are, like, fine. I'm not super sold on anything in particular, which is why they're up to. I was kind of expecting to, like, be like, oh, I want this one, or, you know, I don't want that one, and then play, like, 3 and 3 like a normal human being. But that never happened. I never found it to be like, oh, yeah, this is what I want to play here. For, the main get cards, it's just like, here's Primera, here's Judea. I'm not on Bonfire in this deck list because, A, it plays into Troll, and I think the goal of this is to not play into hand traps as much as possible and not be worried about, like, searching and stuff that you need to resolve and not being, like, not worrying about any hand trap your opponent plays. That's why we're not playing Called by the Grave. I think this deck can get away not playing Called by the Grave. And I think that is a great boon because the idea is that your hand traps are going to make you be able to go second. This is also why I think this deck got very lucky, because I think realistically speaking, you need to draw like 3 hand traps to go second with this deck most of the time, because otherwise you need like Lubellion plus Primera at least to have even vaguely reasonable 2 pushes. And otherwise you're not very likely to have multiple strong pushes. The deck is not super amazing. I think it's fine at playing through hand traps, but like an end board tends to like interact with you more strongly than hand traps do. For the Bestials, I'm playing 1 of each. I just want live 1s rather than wanting to play the best, which would probably be Druid Swarm. And I think that has served me well. Gargoyles, better when you go first than for the grind game. I don't think this deck really needs to play for the grind game any stronger than it already inherently does, so I don't. And it's a little better going first, in my opinion. So that's why I'm playing this. Stand up. Don't lead with this. People are on Ghost Ogre, me included. Unless you have the Oath in hand. Every time I had Oath in hand, I'd lead with it, and I'd be like, come on, Ghost Ogre, Ghost Ogre, Ghost Ogre, and they never ogred me, and it was so sad. Regained, I think, is good. I was just talking about not needing to play for the grind game, but here's the thing. Sometimes you only open Lubellion. We're not playing a ton of starters, and opening just Lubellion and being able to go Regained, I think, is actually pretty important in order to keep some stuff live. And then usually what will end up happening is you'll like normal summon a hand trap, Lubellion, special summon, set, Regained is what'll happen, ideally. Or sometimes you'll normal summon like a Primera or something, and you'll end up having it like Veilered or whatever, and you'll have like a Regained line because you can go into the extra deck. It depends. This list is playing 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Like 21 hand traps. Like I said before, that's why I think it's lucky that I got a 10-win streak, because it's like when you go second, you just need to draw a bunch. And this deck, kinda consistently, you'd expect 2 or 3 hand traps with this deck list, right? And I honestly think 2 is like, if you're playing against Snake Eye, is like a bit on the lucky side to stop your opponent with 2. We're not playing Fualas. Hypothetically, because when I go first, my end board isn't super strong. In reality, it's because this card is a UR, and I haven't tried how I feel about it. I do think it does something when you go first, kind of. But like I've said before, I feel like when you go first, you need to stop your opponent, like, completely. And I don't know that Fualas does that in the way you need to happen. Because I don't know. Like, Maxi stops any push, and Fualas only stops it if they special summon from deck or extra, which can be good enough. But like I said, I haven't bothered crafting the card. I don't think it's particular. I think it's very strong, but I feel like just because we have a discard outlet, I don't think means that we automatically have to play Fualas. It doesn't feel like it does what you want it to do for this deck, in my opinion. But I could be very wrong on that. I haven't tried it. I haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about it, except being like, I don't want to be bothered to craft that card yet. I'll craft it later. Extra deck's pretty straightforward. We're playing 2 8s. Neither of these actually came up this time. Not surprising. These are there's a lot of like tech cards in here. Underworld Goddess goes into tech card 2. So, like, these 3 cards are pretty cuttable. I think it's good to have an 8 that's worthwhile making, just in case, though. And I think Omega's probably the top one, or Chaos Archfiend. Phalanx makes Archfiend live, and that can be, like, fun, or your opponent or you activating a Bastille or something, and just being able to run over everything and banish it can be super powerful. Baron de Flor, pretty straightforward. Chaos Angel can be important for when you have a Bastille and, like, only a Trudea in the back row. Making sure that you get to make a relevant interruption on your opponent's turn. Cipher, I did not make. I like having a different one other than 2 Cosmic, because Cosmic is a UR, and also because I think it can be nice to have the destruction protection. I think this was more relevant when Tempai was more popular. I feel like being able to stop the destruction when you had the high roll hands that could make this were way better. I think that Tempai is not popular enough to justify making Cipher over Cosmic Blazar. But also Cosmic Blazar tends to be insane against that deck anyways, just because you sort of judgment this, their Synchro, unless they have a hand that can play around that insanely well. Crimson Dragon obviously cheats out this stuff, so that's important. I'm running 1 Legacia, 1 Auxilla. I think you could run 2 Legacia to draw extra cards, because you only need the first Auxilla. Zeus, I still desperately want the hard make Zeus to be an optimal play eventually, and I refuse to take this card out of my deck until it happens. But we'll see how that goes. Typhon sometimes will help clear up a gummy board state that you otherwise can't deal with. Almirage and Artemis are basically here for SP Little Knight plays. Underworld Goddess is here in case your opponent does any nonsense. I don't think I used, like, any of the more techie cards, so I didn't use Omega, Chaos Archfiend, Almirage, Artemis, or Underworld Goddess, or Cipher. I think I used Typhon. I don't think I used Zeus. So if you want to change extra deck stuff, feel free to. There's a rank 12, the Supernova card that I think a bunch of people play, that I think is way overrated, but also, like, and I say overrated because, like, people will make it and then it will have done nothing, and I'm like, oh, I thought you were going to make a Crimson Dragon or something that actually did something here, and instead they'll make Red Supernova Dragon. I don't think this is a bad card, but in my experience, it just seems to have been bait so much of the time when my opponents go into it. Yeah. So that's what I climbed with. I didn't really have in mind a specific deck I wanted to climb with this season. So I was just sort of messing around with decks I like. Played Sky Striker going second. I really like doing that a lot. And then when I was like, I'm kind of tired of watching my opponents make boards, here we are. I'm very excited to announce that Beatrice will be banned soon. I don't know if that's going to be enough to make me fine going second again for a bit with no hand traps, but we'll see. I'm hoping it does, because there were a lot of times where I would see my opponent using a Beatrice line where otherwise they would not be able to go into full combo, whether it be with Snake Eyes or White Forest. Like, oh my gosh, Beatrice is insane. Elf, bannably strong, but I mean, I think Promethean Princess is bannably strong too, and we don't seem to want to ban that. I actually feel like Promethean Princess is more bannable than Elf, in my opinion, but I honestly hate the targeting protection more. But that's neither here nor there. I don't, neither of those cards, like, fill me with this, oh my gosh, this card has to be banned kind of feeling, like Beatrice did. Beatrice being full combo for these decks, to me, was much more fair than what I'm used to have seen a Beatrice do, which was, like, adding a bunch of fairies when, like, Master Duel released for the Herald deck to have literally 6 Omni Negates in hand. That also negated summons, by the way. That was a cool card. Cool deck. Just like, you know, Or like the Mayakashi trap and transaction rollback. Just set up a bunch of things where it'd be like, wow, okay, yeah, we're doing something, huh? But yeah, so those are the decks I played. I enjoy Centurion. I enjoy Sky Striker. So I played those two decks. And I already had them, so I didn't really have to craft anything for them. Alright, later.